Hi everyone, Megan here from Beguiled by Books, and today I'm going to tell you about my not so favorite books from 2023. Let's get started. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the books I read in 2023 that weren't 5 stars, that weren't my favorite, that just didn't do it for me. With me today, we have a special guest. This is Jessie Bean. She's one of my 2 cats. And she's just being very, very affectionate, and she's going to help me film today. So some of the books in 2023 that I read that I didn't love, but I did finish. The first one was The Heart is the Strongest Muscle by Tia Toomey. Tia Toomey is a CrossFit athlete. She's the world's fittest woman for 5 or 6 times in a row. I've been watching the CrossFit Games for many, many years and followed her journey in the CrossFit Games, and she is a spectacular athlete. Unfortunately, the book fell really flat for me. It was a good book if you're in the CrossFit community, if you're getting into the CrossFit community, if you don't read a lot of self-help books, you might find a lot more out of it than I did. But for me, unfortunately, it just fell flat. It just didn't do it for me. The next book that also fell flat for me was In Defense of Witches. I just mentioned this on my November reading wrap-up video. And while it was good and had good information, if you've been following feminism and the patriarchy and how women have been oppressed throughout history, especially around the witch hunts and the witch trials of, 400 years ago or so, there wasn't anything new or special necessarily in this book. So again, it just kind of fell flat. It wasn't bad, just wasn't for me. The next book I read in 2023 that I did not love was The Happiness Advantage. And The Happiness Advantage was a book I read for work, and I mentioned, I think in my August reading wrap up, it also fell flat. It was written in 2010. It was written by a straight white male CEO for other straight white male CEOs, and ultimately, it being published in 2010, it just didn't. It didn't hold up after a decade. So much has happened since 2010 when the book was published, with social justice reform and normalizing things that used to be stigmas like mental health or being a minority in the business place, that the book just doesn't cover a lot of those nuances and comes across as almost toxic positivity. So I just don't think that book holds up anymore since the age of its publishing. Another book I read that I didn't love in 2023 was Violetta, or is it Violetta? Not sure. And this book I saw had tons of great reviews and accolades, and it was called A Powerful Story, and I unfortunately didn't pick up on that. It was like a memoir of a fictional person and the journey of this woman's life. And while there were parts of it that were really compelling, there were parts of it that I just and they just didn't do it for me. That's not my particular genre. There's nothing wrong with the book. There's nothing wrong with the prose. The genre itself, that just didn't, it wasn't the right book. I wasn't the right reader for that book. So super fair and valid, but fell flat for me in 2023. The next book that I read in 2023 that didn't get the hype, kind of fell flat, was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. That book was fine. I gave it 3 stars. It was, I read it. I didn't hate it. It was enjoyable in the moment, but I definitely don't understand why so many people really gravitate to it. They call it dark academia. It was a bunch of privileged rich kids at a college and behaved exactly as I expected them to. I might be jaded. This book was probably pretty groundbreaking back in 1992 when it was published, but it's been 30 years, so it's less groundbreaking. Maybe I've been desensitized to this kind of thing in books. I'll take full responsibility for my opinion, of course. It just didn't do it for me. And then I did not finish several books this year. So the ones I've just listed were books I did finish and didn't love, and then I ended up DNFing more than that. So I DNF'd a book called FireKeepers Daughter at the beginning of the year, but because I thought it was a book that I thought I was reading a different book than that one. I want to reread that one. I want to start that one over. So I definitely don't think that is any kind of negative opinion whatsoever. It just wasn't the right book at the right time. And I was trying to find a different type of book and ended up with FireKeepers Daughter. So we'll go back to that at some point in time. The beginning started off very interestingly, but again, I had to DNF it for other reasons. Another book I DNF'd was The Night and Its Moon. And this was one of those books I saw going around on Booktok a while ago, and people were raving about it, and nothing happened in that book. I think I got 40 or 50% through that book, and nothing had happened. It was a journey, a series of movement from place to place without hardly any action. And the action that was there was not plot driving forward action. And there are apparently multiple of these books, and I will not be able to read any of them, I'm sure, because I can't get past the first one. The next book I had to DNF this year was Devil House. I really wanted to like this book. It was a slow, methodical journalist putting together the pieces of a crime scene from, I think, maybe the 70s, and it did not compel me. I don't remember why it didn't compel me, but the inkling that I have is the male protagonist having to deal with how women were treated in the time the crime was committed in the 70s. And just kind of that overall misogynistic view from the 70s. It didn't hold my attention very well. I wasn't compelled in the way that I wanted to be. So I ended up I had to DNF it about 50% through. Another book I DNF'd was an ARC I received called The Saint of Bright Doors. And again, I was really looking forward to this based on the plot. It seemed really interesting with kind of gods and demigods and various powers and struggling for powers and family relations. It had all the elements, and I think I DNF'd it maybe about 10%. It just could not hold my attention. Again, maybe I'm not the right reader for that book, and that's totally fine. But for whatever reason, I had to DNF that one. The next book I DNF'd was also an ARC, and it's called The Witching Tide. And The Witching Tide, I think my problem with that book was a lot of the dialogue was in the dialect of the time period, which I think was the 16 or the 1700s. So it was more of like kind of that old English, ye old type of old dialect, but very heavy on it. And I struggled to become attached to the characters because I was so focused on parsing out the meaning of the conversations because it was so dialect heavy. So that was my only problem with the book. So I DNF'd it just because life's too short and you shouldn't read books that you're not enjoying. The next book I DNF'd was another ARC, and it was Afterworld. And again, I had high hopes for Afterworld. Basically, it had to do with AI, reconstructing the life of a person, and there were a lot of really cool sci-fi elements. But the AI narration of it, even though it was written by a person, it was written so well like AI that I had no empathy and no care for the characters. It was so clinical and so dry that I didn't feel like I could connect with anything. And I just, again, life's too short. So I DNF'd. The next book that I DNF'd was Shadow Baron. And I was so disappointed that I had to DNF this book. I read the first one as an ARC, I think in 2022, and loved it. Utterly devoured the first book. The action was fantastic. The characters were really fun. The multiple plot lines and the multiple characters were all interwoven with each other. Oh, I was so here for that book. And then the second one came out and it opened with like whatever justice system this made up world had, and it was very dry and very just straightforward is maybe the wrong word, but just dry and kind of dull and boring. And I just couldn't make myself continue. So I had to DNF that one too, because there are plenty of other books to read. And then the last one, much like the very first one that I DNF'd, is Scythe. And a friend of mine actually recommended Scythe, and I got it from my local library, but I had too much on my plate. I had too many things going on, too many books I needed to read by a specific time, that I couldn't give my full attention to Scythe. It was a quiet novel from what I remember. I DNF'd about 50% through. It was quiet, but it was building to something really cool. There are 3 books in this series, and I definitely want to return to that. I did enjoy it, so certainly not a negative comment about anything in the book. I just had too much on my plate to really finish it, so I had to DNF, but it is something I'd really love to finish reading in 2024. What books have you DNF'd or not loved this year in 2023? As we are here at the end of the year, I'd really love your thoughts and your feelings on this. So please drop a comment below and let me know what books you didn't love or you didn't finish this year. And if you like my content, as always, I appreciate a like on this video and a subscribe to my channel. Thanks. Have a great day.